Welcome to In Our AI Era podcast. So, this is our episode 2 with Ragnar and Tina.
Welcome. I want to start today by sharing a true story, which is that yesterday I joined a customer call and I just casually asked them how they're doing. And the customer replied, "Oh, we're really good. On Friday, Ragnar rebuilt our entire agent to use skills." And I thought that was really funny because based on how much you talk about skills, that really checks out.
I'm very guilty of that, but it was really needed.
I came back from holiday. I was out for a couple of weeks and I didn't keep up with anything. And the difference that I've noticed is that now all you can talk about is skills. In fact, I joke with the team that if they do shots while you mention skills, we won't get any work done because we'll all be drunk. So I was hoping you could use this video to get me up to speed. So I want to know, what are skills? Why are they so important to you? How do you create them? Like,
I know you've been gone just for a couple of weeks and then you came back and then we changed our structure to skills. And one of the things I learned is skills are modular packages for your enterprise. But Tina, we've been talking about skills for a while, but the main thing it is the skills have descriptions, set of triggers, conditions, and instructions that activate specifically when the agent needs them. So this is the key piece that when the agent needs them. So not always just when the situation matches. And crucially, the skill lives outside of the agent. So I didn't change too much of the agent, to be honest. All I did was I added agent skills to that thing. So we came up with the business skills from Dataverse. So I added them. Now it's part of that agent, which is going to be amazing for our customers because these skills are reusable. They are easy to update. They are easy to share across agents as well. I also recorded a video on that. So for others, we'll link that in our show notes.
it makes sense why we need this. In our previous episode, episode 1, we discussed the problem of trying to fit your entire business process into the agent instructions and how that is just really not possible. So I can understand that if skills are reusable and they explain how things work in the instructions, it kind of frees you up to not have all of your instructions in the agent's instructions.
Yeah, and we clearly explained how the connected agents work in episode 1, and that was really like going beyond that instructions, right? Now what we are trying to do is not only we go beyond instructions, but also how do you bring that knowledge, the business skills knowledge to the agents beyond the system prompts. So nobody can put all of their things in instructions. That was our first video. Your AP lead has 15 years of experience handling exceptions, right? And how do we write all of them in even connected agents, or your procurement manager knows which vendor categories need special review or other things. So we can add all of those as skills now. So all of this knowledge will live in skills. So this was the real gap that I kept running into before skills became a real pattern. We wrote some amazing instructions when we were building agents. We had some common case. The moment you hit the edge case, the user will come and say, "Oh, this agent, I don't want to use it because it's not doing my job. It's not going to help me to do what I want to do." So that was the gap that we saw. And skills will fill that missing layer. And one of the other ways I was thinking was skills are more like adding features to the agent. The business difference of the agents that's generally intelligent is moving away from intelligence to actual business skills and business work now. So agents will get that.
Okay. Instructions will tell your agent what to do, and skills will teach your agent how the business actually work and capture all of these edge cases and scenarios. I think it's such a shift because it also fundamentally changes how you do instructions, but also prompting. I can give you a skills example if you can tell me if it makes sense. So I do a lot of writing because I just enjoy it. And now I do, of course, a lot of writing with generative AI. And one of the things that really annoys me is how generative AI inserts EM dashes into everything. So what I ended up doing is I have like at every prompt that I ask to write something, I finish it with "don't do EM dashes." It's annoying because I always have to remember to put it, even if I have that, as a copy and paste instruction somewhere, it's just, a bit silly. And I think the EM dashes is one part of the style that I don't want to reflect in my writing, but there's other things too, right? Like sometimes I just want it to sound heartfelt or I want it to sound like me. And it sounds like I can make a skill that's called something like Tina's writing style sheet. put that in a skill. And then whenever I write with an agent, it will take my voice into account, and it will do things like no EM dashes, heartfelt, sound a bit South African, maybe like any of these kind of like style that would make it sound more like me.
Yeah. I mean, skills can still not capture everything that you do, Tina, in the essence, but it helps you to begin that story, right? So it helps you to like not repeat certain things again and again. We can use a skill to get things done. So, and also the industry is moving in that direction completely, right? So Claude came with this very recently. And sometimes I think about when did they launch this, and when I look at back and it's like 6 months, 3 months, and business skills came last month, like 4 weeks ago in Dataverse. So it's kind of crazy how all of the people in the industry are all towards this. But also, we'll make a different video on the orchestration layer where that will be handled by others, but skills will be handled by your team. I also have one available for you on the Microsoft vision of how the skills are being used in Dataverse to connect it with our Copilot Studio.
That sounds really interesting, and we should definitely also link that video below so people can catch up on the Dataverse business skills.
We are talking about skills as features, right? As new requests come in, you want to improve a skill or ship a new skill. So, one of the things I've done is I actually read through all of Anthropic's documentation. I used AI to read it as well, but also I used my own eyes to understand what patterns are they saying. There are some great examples, and we'll link that document below as well for you to go and look at your own patterns.
I'm very impressed that you read all of the documentations, because I just scanned it, and I definitely did not notice the 5 patterns. The only thing I remember is that there's a difference between MCP and skills, and it is that MCP is a professional kitchen, so it gives you access to tools and ingredients and equipment. So it's the technical part, and then skills are the recipes. So they're step-by-step instructions on how you can provide something valuable.
Yeah, and cooks are the agents that will be using those recipes and MCPs, right? So we'll get,
Yeah,
hopefully, we're getting the dish that you ordered.
exactly. Or you can improve it, hopefully, as you go by adding extra ingredients after it's made. So tell me about the 5 patterns that you read in the documentation.
Yeah, so there are 5 patterns. The first pattern is around sequential workflow orchestration. So if you're building a skill, you think of it like a command skill. It can do a certain thing in a certain way. So basically, they are very sequential workflows. I want to use this workflow to do a certain thing. So you can build that as a sequential workflow pattern skill. The multi MCP coordination. Basically, the way I look at it is as an orchestrator skill. So this skill will orchestrate the agent on, hey, I want to do 5 steps. And for each step, I want to use this MCP for this. So I want to use Playwright MCP for certain things. I want to use ERP MCP for certain things. But more importantly, you can also have a skill that will say, I want to use this tool in that MCP. That reduces the load on your agent, but it helps that skill to be more useful, to reduce token size, but more importantly, getting the right context and right tools. And the pattern 3 they mention is the iterative refinement. This is the research skill. This is my fascinating one. I read this and I was very excited because you could go and research not only about your customer and other things, but what if I can research about the skills that I've written? So it's like going in a loop. So I really enjoyed the iterative refinement piece of it. And the pattern 4 is context aware tool selection. So we spoke about the multi MCP coordination one where it uses the tool. But what if you built the tool with context awareness? So it knows if I need to do a read tool, I don't have to go to MCP and ask all the tools that it has. I can know, hey, I want you to go, you only use read tool in this specific table and this thing. So that way it's not going and finding all the things. It's going to be very much more accurate and much more deterministic in a way. And the last one is the domain specific intelligence. I call them the assistant skills. So basically, if you written a skill, like Tina mentioned, her skill is writing skill assistant for Tina. So it's a domain knowledge of how Tina speaks South African or other things, right? So we can bring in the jokes and other things in there. But for finance team, they can build a finance specific one. If you're healthcare, you write it in a certain way. You have certain guidelines and policies you'll be doing.
Right. As you were mentioning the 5 patterns, I was reminded that I did read the Copilot Cowork documentation, the new Cowork feature that we have, and I saw there that you can also add skills, and you can add up to 20 custom skills to your own Copilot Cowork. It's still in preview, so I don't know if it will remain at 20. But I was wondering, like, do you have any insights into like what is a good number of skills to have? Like, do you build an agent and you give it 5 skills, or do you give it like 1,000 skills? Like, where? How do you decide?
Yeah, and initially, I think people should start creating individual skills, right? So that's the first thing. But also, if someone has one of the things we are testing now, and we will definitely make an episode on this, Tina. The concept is called context fork. So it's like how we fork
Okay.
our GitHub repositories and others. So if you have 50 skills for an agent, how would you know that it's using the right skill, right? So that's one thing that's really important. But for briefly, I will mention here, which is in your skill, you can have one primary skill. Like when I wrote my book, the first thing I write is what are all the, it's my index page, right? So you could have a skill that has index page. But then you could also say not every skill in the pattern, like sequential pattern, right? In sequential, we might need context from one skill to the other. But there are a lot of scenarios you don't need all the context crammed into, like every skill doesn't need to know what you did. If you divide and conquer, you also, each skill will go initiate its own worker agent and it has its own context. So that's called the context fork. We'll come up with a different video on that, Tina. But context fork is a single line command. I'll put like a screenshot here on how to write that into your skills. So, but ideally for your question, start with very few skills, start with around 20. And as you grow, either you modify those 20 into 30 or you divide them into 10. You can figure out what works best based on the model you're using.
That makes sense, and that was helpful. So now I have two philosophical questions. The first one is about writing prompts, because I've mentioned already for me, a big part of writing in the beginning was creating a prompt that would do my style. And I think in general, the huge part of the first generation of Gen AI was like learning how to make prompts and how to be good at prompting and how to share prompts. And I think a good example is the prompt buddy that we have at Microsoft. And I think it's an open source tool where you can say all of the you can share prompts in a library. And so an example would be we have a specific format at Microsoft that we have to create our performance reviews, and there would be prompts that could do it in that format. And so prompt libraries were a big thing. My
Yeah.
question is, do you think that prompt libraries will be replaced by skill libraries now?
Okay. So I'll give you one example of why we are moving from prompts to skills, and then I'll answer your question. And it's very interesting question as well, because as you mentioned your example, I realized when we write that prompt, we always got result close to similar, but never the exact answer, right? Because we were still dependent on the model. The model was
True.
reading the
Yeah.
prompt and thinking, if you gave it to ChatGPT, you get a different answer. You gave it to Claude, it gives a different answer, right? But now with the skills, if you give a skill to any model, it has to follow that structure. So it will
Fair.
give you the same output, at least the same output format every time you use the skill. So that's where we are moving away from prompts to skills. So that's one kind of meta point there. And then the other one is, yeah, it's a good question on we're moving to skill library. And the answer is yes. Funnily, I know you'll be laughing at this because I also created my own skill library. But the skill library is not the main goal for me. What I really want people to understand was you'll have a lot of skill libraries. The main skill library will be if you're in an organization, does your org has a skill library? If you are in a team, does your team have a skill library? Me and Tina are in the same team. So we have our own skill library we share across our team. So that's one way to think about that. But yes, skill libraries are going to be a thing, but companies should invest in building their own skill libraries. Teams should invest in creating their own skill library. Individuals should create their own individual skill library. And people like me and Tina will also share skill libraries on our websites where you can go and figure out what you need. So the goal is to removing the friction from finding a skill or going to a place where say, oh, I like this skill, but I can make it better, right? So you go find something, you outsource and find it, and then you bring it and make it your own. And if you like it enough, you add it to your team or your org.
Okay. I think so. That's very insightful. I think one thing that you've also told to me offline is that the biggest skill is going to be finding the right skill library for you. And, finding something that's useful is not going to be that easy.
Yeah.
And another thing that you said that really resonated with me is this idea that skills help a model execute the process better or help different models execute the same process with greater consistency. And it reminded me of the kitchen and recipe metaphor. So, for example, in our house, there's one person that is very good at cooking, and then there is me. And if we would both try to make a dish, let's say we're making a curry, my curry will always be less tasty than his curry. But if I have a recipe, it kind of bridges that gap, right? Then it tells me like which spices to use and how much acidity, and then it comes out a lot better than it would have, without using the recipe. So I think it creates that consistency in the same way that skills will help different models create consistency across processes.
Yeah, I like it, and I can agree with you. One thing we have common here is I'm also not a cook, so we are good podcasters.
Exactly.
We should.
I hope you have, yeah,
Yeah,
I hope you have someone at home that is a good cook. That always helps.
helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and I have a second question. I said I had two philosophical questions.
Okay.
Do you think software engineering will be replaced by skill engineering?
Good question. I think the answer is no. I think skill engineering is going to be its own thing. Who will become better skill engineers are going to be software engineers. That's the way I'm thinking it is. So software engineers are already they're best equipped with building the right skills and thinking the logic and patterns. So I think they will become better skill engineers if we are calling that as a term, and if that's a industry that will come out of it, right? We had prompt engineering before, now it's skill engineering. But I think all of us will become skill engineers going forward. In my view, what I see it is different teams are going to be a different skill engineers. So when we are building our own agents and products in our own team, right, Tina, we have I go to a certain person for a specific skill because I know they could write it better than me. We are all using Claude or ChatGPT or our own cowork. I still go to that person for a reason. Within our own team, we go to our leads who are like so much experienced than me to understand, okay, how I would write this skill to solve this problem. So I still approach them. So I think that's what would be for software engineers. You would really go to them and get the right skill from them, or maybe from their skill library if they create one.
Yes, that's very interesting. And I think we're gonna have to see how this evolves as within the industry. But at least with AI, everything moves so fast. We don't have to wait long to see what's gonna happen. But I think that's something to think about. How do I help myself be better at being a skills engineer, and how can skills help me be a better engineer?
Yeah, that's true. And one thing I will add to that is think of this. Are you going to write a code to do something? Or can you convert it into right? Sometimes we always tend to like go with our traditional flows, which is I used to create Power Automate flows, right? Now I write a skill to do the same flow. So sometimes you need to understand where can a skill come in and take the load off coding or load off some development or something. If skill can do that with an agent and MCP tools, I should still think of the tools. But also, please don't forget to read the Anthropic docs below. And also, I have my skills.arbil.ai linked as well, where you can learn and as well as create skills and as well as check my library.
I echo that. Read the documentation. Don't scan them like I did. Do as I say and not as I did. But I'm also going to go and read it, and I'm going to start building out some skills for customers because now you've convinced me that this is the right way to go. And then in the future one, we can go in more details with the pattern. We can maybe talk about some lessons learned that we have. And yeah, for the next episode, I really want us to talk about Claude managed agents because that's also a new architecture that's come out, and it's kind of the talk of town at the moment. I know you've been looking at it closely, so I think we can do a conversation on that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the next one that's connecting a lot of threads for us. We appreciate you watching this video.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.